Doris, do you want to put up the slide? Like
I
okay.
can. Let's see. Do you guys see it?
Yes, we can see it.
Okay.
And we're live now. So let me go ahead and introduce you really quick, and then we'll go ahead and get started with this very exciting PowerPoint. So welcome everybody. Let me just I'll leave the PowerPoint up here so people can see it and can hear my voice. So welcome to what is now the 5th installment of the Archivist presentation series hosted by the Historians of Catholic Mexico Network. We started this initiative this current academic school year and have been fortunate enough to have some exciting and wonderful presentations from archivists both in Mexico and in the United States, which you can watch in our YouTube channel at HisCatMex. Now, today, it's my pleasure to introduce Doris Cardenas and Deborah Cantor, who are going to lead us in a presentation about the Claretian Missionary Archives, USA, Canada. Right, they join us here today with a very eager audience. So let's give them a virtual round of applause, and get the show on the road. Thank you guys for being here. I appreciate it.
Deborah, do you want me to start or
Go for it.
With introductions? Okay, so my name, as Ricardo said, I'm Doris Cardenas. I work for the Claretian Missionaries Archives here in Chicago. I've been working for the Claretian since 2015. I started as the assistant archivist. Then 2 years later, I became the associate archivist. And as of last July, I am now the provincial or head archivist.
Okay. I'm Deborah. I am not an archivist. I am a historian, and I am going to share my thoughts about working in the Claretian Missionary Archives, which have been going there sort of on and off for 20 years. And at this point, I'm a year into writing the first comprehensive history of the Claretian missionaries in the United States. And over the last year, I've been in the archive for about 4 or 5 months altogether. So I know it pretty well. How about we do a very quick round of people just sharing their names and maybe where you're logging in from today. Y se puede presentarse en español o inglés, como sea. Selena?
Hi, I'm Selena. I work, I'm the archivist for the Catholic Archives of Texas in Austin. I've given a presentation here before, but if you didn't see it, I am the archive for the Texas State Catholic Conference of Bishops, and I also run the archive for the Texas State Knights of Columbus, as in addition to like a couple of other lay institutions as well.
Great. Nathan?
Hi, everybody. I'm Nathan L. Strand. I'm a postdoc at San Diego State University. I do work on the Synarchistas in the context of the United States, and I'm one of the co-founders and co-coordinators of HisCatMex, Historians of Catholic Mexico, alongside Ricardo. Excited for the presentation?
Karina? Or as I call her, Caris, from her Facebook pseudonym.
Hola, buenas tardes a todos. Bueno, mi nombre oficial es Karina Mirel Hernández Pérez. Yo vivo actualmente en el municipio de San Luis de la Paz, en Guanajuato. Yo me uní al seminario, bueno, aquí con ustedes para aprender un poquito más, porque a mí me interesa hacer mi tesis de licenciatura sobre el seminario diocesano de León durante la Revolución. Entonces estoy empezando a hacer mi búsqueda de información, tengo algunas búsquedas de archivo y pues en eso estoy.
Gracias.
Kristen?
Hi, I'm Kristen Melkonian, and I am the Associate Archivist for the Claretian Missionaries Archives, USA, Canada. I work under Doris.
Thanks. Patrick?
I'm Patrick Reardon. I'm a writer. I've written some history. I've written some religious books and some poetry. And I was actually a Claretian seminarian for 9 years. So I'm somewhere in those archives here or there. So I'm kind of snooping to see what you have about everybody.
Great, thanks. And Maurice?
Yeah, my name is Maurice Demers. I'm actually working presently on Catholic missionaries to Latin America coming from Canada. I work at Université de Sherbrooke in Quebec. So I've been going to Mexico and working in many archives. I'm very interested by the presentation.
Oh, wow. Well, that's good. And Ricardo, the two sentences for people who have not met you.
Yes, thank you for that. So my name is Ricardo Alvarez. I am an assistant professor of history here at Baylor University. I'm joining you all from Waco, Texas, and very excited to get this underway. As Nathan mentioned, one of the coordinators of the HisCatMex network, and always a pleasure to meet new folks who are either researching or working in the archive and getting a chance to get to see what kind of cool stuff they're working on. So thank you.
Great, gracias. So Doris and I are going to kind of tag team our way through things today. So Doris, you wanna?
Yeah, I'm gonna start. So this is, bear with us, it's gonna be a little bit different than the other ones you've seen. So, and we have an hour, right? Till 6?
Yeah,
Sometimes
so
I know-
yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
great. Okay.
You got
Sometimes
time,
both of
yes.
us, we can be chatty, so. So to start off, let me see if the screen will go. So I just want to give you a little bit of some background info on the founder of the Claretians. So St. Anthony Mary Claret was born in 1807 in Vic, Spain. He was a Catalonian, un Catalan, and he founded the Claretians in 1849. He was the Archbishop of Santiago de Cuba. He was also the confessor of Queen Isabel II of Spain. He ends up dying in France in 1870, and he was canonized in 1950. The congregation he founded are the Missionary Sons of the Immaculate Heart of Mary. They're more commonly known as the Claretians or Los Claretianos. The congregation started in Spain and kind of gradually spread throughout America, Europe, and the Canary Islands. In the late 1800s, the Claretians headed to the Americas and settled in Mexico in 1884. In 1902, they arrived in Texas and they spread throughout the West in states such as California and Arizona. Eventually, they did make their way to the Midwest and settled in Chicago in the 1920s. I mean, again, I'm kind of simplifying this. There's more to the story than that, but I just don't, I need more time, so I'm not going to do that. They're mostly known for working with the Spanish-speaking community. They work with immigrants, and they're really dedicated to social justice.
So yeah, and this is a map of them from the middle of the last century. So a European origin congregation with a fairly global reach, lots of penetration into Latin America, and they have been in Mexico since the 1880s, and their entry into the United States in 1902 was not from Spain. It was coming north from Mexico when they were invited to Texas to give just some seasonal missions, like leading up to Semana Santa. And then the next thing they know, they were invited to take over the cathedral in San Antonio, Texas. And here they are 121 years later.
So I just want to give you kind of an overview of the archive. So this photo here is our administrative building, which is located in downtown Chicago. The archive is housed on the second floor of the building. This is an old building, dates to the 1890s, and was designed by the architectural firm of Halliburton Roche. They're pretty well known. They've designed a lot of buildings here in the downtown area. This building could probably be landmarked, but the Claretians had chosen not to do that. Originally, it was a warehouse, so it has very thick floors, which is perfect for the archive, so it can withstand really heavy loads of shelving and boxes. Let me tell you a little bit about the archive itself. The Claretian Archives is one of the largest collections of Catholic Latino materials in the United States. The collection consists of material pertaining to parishes, the clergy, the Claretians themselves, the St. Jude League, to name a few. The archive also has rare books from the 1800s written by St. Anthony Mary Claret, as well as books written by other Claretians. We also house U.S. Catholic, which, that's a Claretian, we created that. It's still in production today. And we also have artifacts such as relics. We have over 100 collections, but I can't tell you exactly how much we have, as we have quite a bit of backlog. It's still a work in progress. As some of you may know, especially the archivist present, an archive will always have backlog. And our situation is a bit more complicated because from 1953 to 2011, the US province was actually split into two provinces, the US Eastern Province and the US Western Province. I'm going to say about 12 years ago, the materials from the Western Province, which were housed in California, they were sent to this archive. So the material sat in storage for a few years until my predecessor made a case for more assistance, just due to the bulk of material. And that's actually the reason I was hired. Some of the material is also in Spanish, and he was not fluent in the language. So basically, it was just too much for a staff of one to be able to handle. Currently, we are a staff of two professionally trained archivists, myself and Kristen, who is in attendance. We also have a former Claretian who helps us twice a week for a few hours a day. And sometimes we do get practicum students from Dominican University in River Forest, as they have an MLIS program, and I have a good relationship with the school and the professors. Our archive is climate controlled. It has rolling shelves. We use 2 content management systems, which I will explain shortly. And of course, we're open to researchers, scholars, and the like. Normally, researchers or historians will email or call us. And we, of course, have to inquire, what is the purpose, if we have anything that may help them. We do tend to be careful about that just because we are a religious archive and we do have personnel records of the congregation. So on this screen, this is one of the content management systems that we use. Now, this one we use for our document collections. It's called Access to Memory, but it's also known as ATOM. This is a Canadian product. It was developed by Artifactual in British Columbia. It's web-based, it's open source, it's multilingual, and it's multi-repository. Because it's multilingual and multi-repository, those are 2 of the motivating factors behind our decision to use the system. Especially if one of our other archives decides to use it. We do have, obviously the archive in Rome, an archive in Spain, the Philippines, Mexico City. If they were also to get on the same system, we would be able to access each other's collections, and we wouldn't have to worry about language issues or the use of diacritics. It's also intuitive and pretty simple to use. I've noticed that our interns tend to pick it up pretty quickly. The system is internal and is not available to the public. Initially, we had it on the server, but we had some issues with updates in our IT department. So we just figured it was easier to have the actual company host it. When we did that, though, we ended up with a blank environment. So what that means is we have to enter things manually versus migrating what we had before. The company told us that it would cost more money to migrate, and based on how many collections we had input, it wasn't worth the money. So for us, that wasn't a big issue. We weren't really happy with how we entered the information to begin with. We kind of jumped the gun a little bit, and talking to other archives who use the system and seeing how they've done it, we decided, you know what, we're going to start over with a clean slate. So it's fine. So the collection that you see here is the first one we've entered. This is our collection of Our Lady of Fatima in Perth Amboy. And one of the things that we like about this system is that it can automatically generate finding aids once you have entered a collection. You also have the option of uploading a finding aid if you already have one, and you can see right there on the bottom where the red arrow is. If you got it, you can upload it. This is in draft mode though, so there's another option that will pop up once you remove the draft mode, and it'll ask you if you want the system to generate it for you. We've never really had binding aids. My predecessors didn't really find a need for it. But to me, this is something that I feel we need to work on moving forward, especially considering how we're growing and we keep binding new material. So when we found out that the system could generate a binding aid, that was a bonus for me. The second content management system that we have is Content DM, and this we use for our photograph collections. Content DM is an American product, and it's based out of Dublin, Ohio. So the system allows you to showcase your digital collections on a personalized website, and that's exactly what we did. As you can imagine, this was not easy to do. It took us quite a while. We had to work in conjunction with OCLC and a web developer to get this off the ground. We're still in contact with the web developer. We almost have him on as a consultant. So whenever we have an issue, I mean, he helps us, with the back-end interface. The system is multilingual, like access to memory. I would say it's just not as intuitive. It really requires more in-depth training. It can be finicky at times, especially when it comes to updates, uploads, and in addition, it's proprietary. So it costs us a yearly fee and it's not a cheap system to have.
I'll
this-
just jump in here
Yeah,
and
yeah.
say, maybe it's not super easy to use from the archivist's point of view, but from the viewpoint of a user.
Oh,
there's-
absolutely. I mean,
there's
visually,
1,800 digitized photos that are up, available to the public, and they're very searchable.
oh
And
yeah.
I basically wrote the outline of my book based on the photograph collection. So I was able to see where there was a lot of rich material, where there were some interesting stories. And, there are some places in the Claretian history that are not well covered, but it does a pretty good job. So
Yes.
that's
yeah,
something
for-
I would totally recommend to people to visit.
Right, for the user, excellent. Back end, don't deal with it. You get a headache. It does take a lot. But visually, I mean, it's very appealing. This is open to the public. Anybody can go on there and you can either browse by typing in the search box that you see to the upper right, or you could just click on the Browse Collections tab. Currently, like Deborah said, we have slightly over 1,800, I think about 1,820 photos that we've uploaded. Last year, actually, we started using one of the features that we had not had the opportunity to try out, and that's the blog. Deborah has been assisting us with that. So she'll write up a blog for us, and then I just go and post it, via the backend interface. We also have a map and a timeline under the resources tab. And kind of how we get the material up. So we start by scanning the photographs, and we scan a raw image and a TIFF file. And then we also do a low resolution image as a JPEG. The ones that you see on the website are low resolution JPEGs. Otherwise, I mean, we would run out of space way faster. So whenever we get a photo inquiry, we just go to the master TIFF file and then we convert it to a JPEG at the appropriate resolution. I mean, this website has come in handy, especially when it comes to individuals asking for photographs. Many a time, I'll have a Claretian employee who needs a photograph for whatever reason. They search the site, and once they find what they need, all they have to do is contact the archive. They tend to give me the accession number, and then I just have to go into the computer and send them a copy of the image in the resolution size that they need. So, kind of sticking with photographs, I had mentioned earlier that we don't really have binding aids for documents. However, as far as our photograph collections go, the system we have devised as far as organizing would be considered a binding aid in a way. We have thus far these 30 thick black binders, which you can see in the image on the left. And in there, every photograph that is processed is cataloged with an accession number, a description, any other pertinent information, such as if it's a black and white photo, is it a color photo, has it been digitized? If it has, we'll mark it with a red check mark. And you can see again the example on the left. It takes a while to do this, but it has its advantages. I can recall on one occasion where I had a seminarian come to the archive looking for photos of St. Anthony Mary Claret for a PowerPoint presentation that he had to give. So I just simply, pulled the binder that has all the Claret photos in it. He could go through it. He let me know what pictures he was interested in. which makes my job way easier. If it's already scanned, I simply go to the computer and I can just email a copy of it. If it isn't, I go into the climate control, pull the photo and scan it for the individual. So by using the binders, we're limiting how much the photos are being handled, both by the archivist and others, and it helps prevent further wear and tear. Now, the image on the right of the screen, this is like one of my favorites. I think this is a gem. So I'll tell you a quick story of how I found this. This photo was not in the archive. It was not even in our backlog. Sometimes whenever we're going to get new tenants or they have to vacate a floor, someone will get a hold of me and ask if I would like to look at the things that they're leaving behind, or is there anything that the archive might need. 95% of the time, it's either duplicates or garbage. So this time I was very pleasantly surprised when I see who is in the picture with these Claretians.
And this is a photo from Chicago, by the way. So does anybody recognize anybody in the photo?
Hint, it's someone famous from the golden age of Mexican cinema.
Oh my God.
Come on now.
Of course, it look in the middle,
Okay,
right?
Nathan
It's-
gets
Yes,
participation
yes.
points.
Yes.
yeah.
And
I'm
did
sorry. I was muted. I was
Oh.
like looking at it. Yeah, I mean this it kind of looks like Pedro Infante from the profile, but it might be Jorge Negrete or one of those guys, right?
So
like
you had it. You
Pedro
had it on the
Infante,
first,
right?
it's Pedro
Yeah.
Infante. So,
Yeah, that's amazing.
so
Yeah,
I couldn't
yeah.
believe it when I'm like,
I
oh
was
my
looking
God.
at this. It took me a little while because I was thinking, wait, what? Like I was really trying to. So this was in Chicago, right?
Yes. And
He would,
imagine,
he'd come to Chicago and he would do
Yeah.
fundraisers with the Claretians.
Oh my
He was like,
gosh.
they had him on speed dial. So he came multiple times, which
That's
is a kind of
amazing.
a good example of how this archive ends up telling us quite a bit about the Mexican diaspora and connections back to Mexico. So
right. They
and on
regularly,
the photo on the left that Doris picked, where we've got these priests standing in the stairwell of a rectory, at the center of the group is the Archbishop of Guadalajara, Archbishop Garibi y Rivera, who was in Chicago. Like, he came every year. And you know what? He wouldn't stay with the cardinal in his mansion on the north side. He would stay at Little St. Francis of Assisi Rectory with the Claretians. His nephew was a parishioner there in Chicago. So there was lots of back and forth between Guadalajara and the Claretians.
right. And they're known to, they tend to always look for celebrities, or they would find them to come to events. They've got quite a bit, but a bunch of photos with Danny Thomas. For those of you that know, created St. Jude Hospital. So yeah, we have great finds here. I'm very happy when they asked me to go to this floor, because I can only imagine, had they not, it could have been thrown out. So, and then I just want to briefly touch upon the Mexico City archive. So besides the US-Canada one, we do have an archive in Mexico City. It's located in Colonia Narvarte. I was there briefly in 2019, mostly to see if they had anything that provided information for the US province, especially during the early years when the Mexican Claretians made their way to the US. As it turns out, I did happen upon a mission that we had no records of, so that was a wonderful find. I do want to mention, though, that they don't have a professional archivist. Actually, they don't have anybody working there at all. There is no archivist. I was told that the archive was organized with the help of a historiographer. So at least I was pleasantly surprised they did a good job of, organizing things. But apparently it's the provincial secretary who works as the archivist when he has the chance. But it was pretty apparent to me that they don't get many visitors. The reading room, which is the one that you see all the way on the right, I'm guessing that's probably what gets the most visitors. That's where the provincial secretary probably puts books or goes and does something in there. Beyond that door, that's where the archive stacks and the banker boxes are. When I get to the banker boxes, I could see a lot of them kind of were covered in dust. So I could tell nobody's been there in a while. And even when I went there the first day, it was under lock and key, and they told me you are one of the very few people, whoever gets to see this. So to me, this archive could potentially be a rich source for scholars in Mexico. I would like to go back and spend more time there, see what else the archive contains. I'm sure they have interesting material. I just think I would need to be there at least minimum of 3 to 4 weeks just to get a better understanding and grasp of, of what they contain.
So you would get a little bit of sense of some of the things that might be in that Mexico City archive from a book which the Mexican Claretians have published. And one of the best sources that we do have in Chicago is the annually published Annales, the Annals of the Congregation, where the missionaries in Colombia, Argentina, Africa, Japan would send in their reports to Spain, and they would all be compiled, and then they'd be published and they'd be sent out to all of the communities throughout the world. The Annales they strike me as being very much akin to like the Jesuit relations, with these little reports sent in to remind everybody what kind of work they were doing off in these corners. So the Annales, I found, were a pretty good source to understand the early years of the Claretians' work within Mexico. A lot of the reports came from the urban parishes, which by 1900, I think they were like in 8 or 10 cities. They were in Toluca, they were in Guanajuato, Puebla, Orizaba. They had 2 parishes in Mexico City, Jesus Maria and San Hipólito. And in addition to these reports on urban parishes, and there were pretty good reports about these urban parishes with the coming of the revolution in like 1911, 1912. And I thought there were super interesting reports in the Annales about temporary missions to haciendas. So you get some pretty finely detailed accounts there. We can do the next slide.
Yeah. Hold on 1 second, the roundup, it's a little stuck. There we go.
There are lots of, the United States Claretian communities begin forming in 1902. They separate off from Mexico and become an independent province in 1922. But across this time period, there's a lot of back and forth between Mexico and the United States. And when there were moments of anti-clericalism in Mexico, the United States and Claretian congregations become sort of a safe haven for Claretians. So in the photograph on the left, we have underneath the Virgin of Guadalupe, Father James Tort. Father James Tort was working in Mexico in 1914. I think he was working at the seminary in Toluca. He had to disappear and hide from the revolutionaries, makes his way to Texas in 1914. And here he is, 1928, overseeing the dedication of the very first brick and mortar Mexican church in Chicago, Our Lady of Guadalupe. And present for the occasion were exiled bishops and archbishops from Mexico. The other photo is from the Cristero period, when seminaries were shut down across Mexico, and the Claretians simply, well, I don't know how simple it was, but they brought all their seminarian staff and boys up to San Antonio and tried to keep going with their education. Another related sort of like a sister order of the Claretians that came to the United States in the 1920s were the Cordy Marian sisters, who needed a safe haven and then found that there was a significant Mexican population with whom they could do good works. And they were very present in Chicago and in Texas and probably elsewhere, but I forget. This map that we've got here is from the archive website, gives you a little sense of the geographic spread of the Claretians. They start off in Texas, they end up making their way to Arizona, to California, they're in the Great Plains, they're in Chicago, etc. Maurice, they're up there in Quebec, which I'm not writing about in my book, but they're there and they're still there actually. So that's an interesting story that I'm not following. But anyway, so
Actually, my nephew studied at their college in Victoriaville,
oh,
which
okay,
is central between Quebec and Montreal.
right. Okay. So, and one of the things which I have found, this is like basically what I do my research on, is, the formation of little communities like Martindale, Texas, que eran todos inmigrantes mexicanos, exiliados, gente migrante, people that worked with their hands. These people were probably all cotton pickers, following the harvest. But the Claretians established a church and help find support for it. And, the church is still standing and very active 120 years later. Next slide. One of the things that the Claretians did and left a kind of record of Mexican American life. I don't want to overdo this too much, but they published a weekly magazine in Spanish. So it was called La Esperanza. It began in 1929 and it was published every week through the end of 1955. This is available online. So it is available, it is searchable on the Catholic News Archive, which I think maybe Notre Dame hosts, but Catholic News Archive, very easy to search. It has a degree of content from the United States. Some of the best stuff is about advertisements from Mexican businesses in California. People wrote in like letters, thanking the Virgin of San Juan de los Lagos for helping them, or thanking St. Jude or whatever, or with religious dilemmas, kind of like a Dear Abby writing for advice. And so we get a little bit of sense of back and forth. And there's always news from the Spanish-speaking Catholic world in every issue of La Esperanza. Most issues had coverage, kind of like the level of a news service of news coming out of Mexico. But this was something which had a few thousand subscribers who read it every week and read it aloud to their children, I have heard in oral histories. And just in general, I would say that the Claretian Archive in Chicago is probably the single most extensive collection on Mexican Catholic diasporic life. And there's just all kinds of things that you can find, from the fundraisers with the Mexican movie stars to parish announcement books, libros de anuncios. On the left, we have the earliest reading of bands or amonestaciones. These young people would meet under the shadow of the steel mills in Chicago, and their information would be read in front of the whole congregation. This is like from 1925, and we've got Carlos Fernandez, a native of Chihuahua, and he has met Maria Luisa of Durango. They meet in Chicago. They get married on May 3rd. And that is the beginning of a new Mexican Chicago, a new diasporic community. There's a ton of information from lay societies that grew up at all of these parishes, some of them pretty heavily organized and orchestrated by the Claretian priest, and others, I think, reflecting more the desires of the laymen and the lay women who took part in their activities. And I think that's good.
So these are just 3 books that I'd like to show you all. They've been written using material from the archive. And this just goes to show that even though our collections are not used all the time and we don't get many researchers, the collections have still been the basis for several books. I mean, we do have a good collection. It's just people don't know it, I mean, whether because we're a religious, organization, I have no idea. But, I think it's a wonderful collection.
I mean, those are some pretty heavy hitters that you guys have there. Las vacas sagradas or the Claretian. This is amazing. Thank you guys. Deborah, Doris, are there any sort of concluding remarks that you'd like to share with the audience?
Well, thank you for having us, as your guest speakers today. And we just look forward to any questions that you may have. We'd be happy to answer them. If you have any comments, we'd love to hear them.
Thank you both. That was fantastic. I'm going to give you a virtual applause sign. Thank you. That was such a fascinating presentation. I mean, even without the Pedro Infante image, it was already a great and fantastic presentation, and that just kind of added that new dimension. So now we're opening up the floor for some questions for both Doris and Deborah. I'm going to go ahead and insert myself here since I'm host, and I'm just going to ask a quick question about the Mexico City archive that you were presenting on.
Yes.
I was really curious about it. And so you were mentioning that some of those boxes in the back, right, were kind of like in this locked space, right? And there's, one person who's kind of working these and so on. So if any researcher wanted to do some work in that particular archive, right? Do you feel like it would, that it would be open to academics, or would it help to maybe have a letter from, say, like you or someone who, is in the system already?
Yes.
Like, what would you recommend? And this could be either a Mexico-based or US-based scholar, it doesn't necessarily have to be, one or the other, but just in general. What do you think would be kind of a good best practice? Because that particular archive seems to be kind of isolated, right? It doesn't get that many people. What would be kind of a best practice there for someone who might want to go?
So what I would do, because it took me, just so you guys know, about 2 years to get in there for whatever the reason. It was a process. I got to the point where I had to go higher up and tell the provincial, like, I need some help here. Maybe you've got a contact that I don't. I just don't know how to get in here. So he did it for me. At this point, I feel that the provincial secretary should know who I am. That's who I talked to, once I was connected to him. If you are interested, I would say feel free to mention my name. I'm the archivist, here in the United States. I've been there before. I think a letter of recommendation would help. But yeah, I mean, if someone's ever interested, get a hold of me and together we can figure something out for you. But I think they would be open. I just think it's the hesitancy that they just don't have anybody in there. And for them to find, I guess, pool probably a member, like, okay, you need to stay with this person or you've got to search for things. I think that's also an issue. When I was there, the US provincial joined me a couple of days later because he happened to be in the area. And we had mentioned to the Mexican provincial, maybe it's worth at some point in the future, think about it, either hiring an archivist or even if it's, a Claretian that we could train just to help you. And he said they'd think about it. So we'll see where that goes.
Great. Thank you. And just, go ahead, Deborah.
To that, in addition to the fact that Doris could write a note, Doris could probably ask the US provincial to write a note on behalf of the scholar. So if it's a project that we, would make sense to do where the doors would be open in Chicago, then the case could be made that the doors should be open in Chicago. But I don't think I think people should assume that it would take some strategizing to get in.
Yes, it wouldn't be done right away. And we're lucky that the provincial, the American provincial that we have is friend of the archives. He's really into archives. I mean, he knows how to use an archive. He's done research, so he's very helpful.
Yeah, and just a follow up and just a second question on this, and then I'll let folks ask is, so, I mean, it's just thinking about the global reach of the Claretians, right? That map that Deborah was presenting to us at the beginning. I mean, is the situation one where like each of these different countries has its own different even think about the database that you were presenting on, Doris, right? Like, and the different languages and so on. I'm assuming, is it safe to assume that there is no like central headquarter place where you can find stuff on everywhere, but rather that you have to go to all these different sites around the world to kind of get the global panorama? Or is there one archive that might be referred to as like a quote unquote like a headquarters? Or I know the Knights of Columbus have the Supreme Council archive in New Haven, right? In addition to the local archives that you'll find at the state level. So, for the Claretians, right? Like, let's say that I wanted to just see what they were doing in Africa. I don't know, but like, is it a situation where I would have to go there, or
Yes,
might
because
you
it
be able
happened to
find it?
me. Let me tell you. So I had
Yeah,
a
yeah.
researcher contact me. And
Sure.
again, it was something she needed from Equatorial Guinea. And I figured, I don't even have that. So I contacted Rome, and all I got was, oh, well, contact Africa. So I contacted the provincial secretary. So it seems, in my experience, that they tend to push this off to the provincial secretary most of the time. And I think part of the problem in some cases is either they don't have enough personnel. That's what I've been told by the provincial office. And I think also the fact that the only professional archivists are here in Chicago, Kristen and myself, that's it.
Okay.
So yeah, I mean, if you need something from another province, you are going to have to reach out to that country and try to find the provincial secretary. Yeah, so it's unfortunate that there is Rome, but again, I mean, I've reached out to them and they just don't have it. They just say, reach the province that you need.
And that database that you showed us is just for the US?
Yes, we, a couple of years ago, as far as content DM and the photographs, we did approach Rome. We had a meeting with Rome. And at the time they said, we're sorry, but we're not interested. So again, we have tried. We're hoping, I know, what are they thinking? Again, I think it comes down to having to hire personnel. That's always an issue. As far as the Anim one, that possibly, as I said, it's easier to use. I think someone could be taught to do it. Depending in the next couple of years how things go, I could approach them again and see, okay, would you be willing? This is an easier system. We could train you, or someone could come here to the US, or I could go down there, whatever's easier. And that would help us out. We could even test it with one archive. Our hopes were that we would be able to test it one day with Mexico City.
Fantastic, fascinating. All right, thank you both. Anyone else, please go ahead, ask away. We have several minutes left in the conversation.
I have a question. I just have a comment. I think that both Content DM and Adam look fantastic. I've worked with Content DM before on the user end, and it's horrible. So good job with that. And we don't have that at the Catholic Archives. I'd love to get to that point one day. We use archive space, which is just a way to just put out finding aids on a public end. And that's been working pretty well, I think, from my end at least. And also we all like our Texas Catholic Historical Society journal. I don't know if you are familiar with it. There's an article that was written by our Bishop Emeritus of Lubbock, and he wrote about his family's history with the Mexican Revolution, I think maybe 3 or 4 years ago. So I can send you an electronic copy of that if you don't have it.
Oh, you're talking about Bishop Aceto.
Yeah.
He published that with y'all?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, it's funny. People in Chicago.
The speech that he gave.
He gave me, I went out to talk with him in the summer, and he gave me a manuscript, typescript copy. But I don't think other people in the American province know it exists. And it's kind of an amazing,
it's really good
transnational story. Very moving.
Yeah.
So, okay, published. Good to know.
Selena with the humble brag and the power.
Well, I was not here when it was published, but yes, I can share that with you, that copy.
Fantastic. Maurice, I see your hand is up, so you go ahead and ask the next question, and then Nathan, you can go after that.
Yeah, well, thank you very much for the presentation. That was really good and very interesting, especially with all the resources to find stuff. I was wondering what kind of restrictions exist on the documents?
So if it's personnel, we usually can't access until 25 years after they're deceased. And again,
Okay.
that's just because it's personnel. As far as parishes, that's pretty open, just get a hold of us. And if I've got info, I don't have an issue sharing that. Yeah, our restrictions are mostly for the personnel files.
Yeah, 25 years. That's very reasonable. I was asking because sometimes with some congregation, it's a bit longer.
Right.
Those restrictions.
Yeah, I sat in on one. It was, I forgot what congregation it was. We couldn't believe it. Where they said that the restrictions are for 170 years. We're like, then who's going to use it? It was insane. Yeah, it was crazy.
Okay, well, thank you.
Nathan, go ahead.
Yeah, I also want to thank you both for such a great presentation. Done some research there in the past. I've always enjoyed being at the Claretian Archive, so it's a great place to be. My question is regarding La Esperanza, right? So I know you have physical copies there, and I've looked at physical copies, plus they're online. I've looked at the online copies as well through the Catholic News Archive on the Catholic Research Resources Alliance. The thing I've noticed is that you have to go copy by copy. Is there any way to look it up via OCR? I mean, that would be preferable. I know that's a lot to ask. Just like a search function. It looks like Ricardo's shaking his head no.
You got to get lost in the archive, man. Like that's what you got to do. You got to have the dust in your glasses, and like control.
I know.
Like my students. You sound like my students.
That's the thing with La Esperanza. When I've been looking at it online in the past, you just have to kind of scroll through each respective PDF. But yeah, going back to my question, is there any thought about doing OCR in regards to that and any other like online materials? You also mentioned like content DM and Adam. Are those available from home, from remote? Do you have to physically be in the archive itself?
We don't have to be physically in the archive. Now, you as a user, if you wanted to look up, like I said, the Content DM, which is a website, you've got access to that. Adam, it's only Kristen and myself who have access. And yes, we have that about the OCR, Nathan. We're thinking about it for other publications and other smaller things. And we've just, again, that we need to talk about that. We've never gotten beyond just mentioning, would this help us? Would this not? Is it worth our time for something that someone may ask every few years? So yeah, we need to think about it.
And would you mind dropping the Content DM link into the chat?
Oh yeah, not at all.
Awesome.
Yeah, and if you ever...
Nathan, did you find La Esperanza helpful for your work?
Little bit. I mean, so Malachi, told me about it a long time ago, and he said, you're going to find a lot of good information. And so originally when I was looking at it, I was like piecing through it, and it was kind of falling apart in my hands. And so I'm glad it's online. I'm glad it's digital. But yeah, there's bits and pieces about the Synarchistas, but there's not a ton.
I don't feel like there's that much that's like real news. I have been sort of struck by the fact that the Claretians USA kept this thing going as a weekly for 30, 40 years. They kept begging their priests to send in articles and announcements and to get more subscribers. And it was really clear to me that this publication was limping along like its whole existence. The Claretians tended to be much more excited about their English language publications, like the Voice of St. Jude, which was a very big Catholic monthly, and then Today U.S. Catholic. La Esperanza was kind of like, like a poor stepchild. And I think they put in a lot of filler. And so I thought I was really going to use it as a major source in my book. No. It's there, and you can search things, but you have to search them issue by issue, and it's kind of it's tedious. Yeah.
I was just gonna say, Doris, anything or Deborah, anything that you guys are sharing links, if you want to just email them to us too. If you want us to share it with the group, just take note of it, and that way we can also share this information for those who aren't on Zoom. But that was a great question, Nathan. Maurice, I saw you had a hand up, so go ahead if you have another question.
No, sorry, I think I just didn't. I had no other question. Thanks.
I have a quick, kind of historical question, just based on one of the pictures that you all showed us. The one that Deborah was going over, right, where it's like you see the bricks of that first church in the background, right? And it's the Claretians. And I mean, one of the figures there is Pascual Diaz Barreto, right? Who would become the Archbishop of Mexico City after 1929. Like he's kind of in the middle of that picture, which really struck me, right? Like in all his robes and his regalia, right? I'm just curious, as someone who doesn't know very much about this particular group, do you feel like after the 1929 arreglos, like because of those connections with the hierarchy, that it somehow bolstered the missions in Mexico? Like, you know, I don't want to say like it gave them kind of like a preferential treatment sort of thing, but right? Do you feel like those connections were important in terms of allowing then the Claretians to expand in I know they were in Mexico before they were in the U.S., but I'm just curious if having those connections so far up in the hierarchy, strengthened them after the Civil War, the Cristero Rebellion.
That's a good question. They always seem to be they always seem to be in with the bishops. So like before the revolution, you've got bishops like, the Bishop of Monterrey is like inviting the Claretians to come and set up shop. There's something about them that they like. I don't know, maybe they like that they're Españoles, which is both like a positive attribute, and then it's also kind of their downfall, like, they're associated with Españoles, con gente rica, gente bien, and all of that. They're all civilized because they're Spanish, but I think there's also the idea that maybe they're snobby. So I think that's their outsider status as Spaniards. They're hesitating they've been in Mexico for like 20 years. Around the time of the revolution, and they're still not comfortable with the idea of bringing niños mexicanos into seminary. They don't like the idea of they don't think they can handle becoming priests. I mean, basically, I think the Claretianos Españoles at the beginning of the last century, they were ethnocentric. They were xenophobic.
Yeah.
Well, not xenophobic. That's not the word I want. They were ethnocentric. They were racist. They looked down at Mexicanos as being, like medio indio.
They didn't see it as like real Catholicism even sometimes, right? Like Mexican Catholicism was seen kind of disparagingly.
Well, I don't think that they thought, and again, I'm not talking about like after, 1930, but like before that, I think the Claretians didn't think that Mexicanos de Mexico, I don't think they thought they had leadership potential. And they had some pretty kind of racist things they said about them as like mixed race people and this and that. And I don't think that's at all the case today. But and they didn't really act that way in the United States. They definitely, with Mexican American people growing up in California and in Kansas and this and that, they thought, oh, they could go to seminary, they could become priests. So
fantastic, fascinating. Would anybody else have any other questions for either Doris or Deborah?
No, but it's been a good hour.
And we did it. We hit it exactly.
Thanks all for coming out.
Yeah, this was great. So I just want to thank everybody in the audience who came to the Zoom room. I also saw that we had a handful of people following us on YouTube, and it's also on social media. So we'll have some folks following us there too that I can't see right now. But and thank you everybody in the audience. Thank you, Doris and Deborah, for putting this together. Really, really cool stuff. Fascinating material. Makes me think about what I want to do for my second and third projects down the line, right? So this is I'm kind of done with my topic at this point. I'm looking for something cool and new, and this is really exciting. So thank you again, and we'll make sure to distribute the PowerPoint, the link to the video, any materials that you guys might want to share with the broader network. We'll make sure to send those along via email in the coming days. But yeah, thanks again. Stay tuned. We might have another one of these down the line in the semester. I'm still working out with some other archivists. If not, we'll certainly continue this into the next academic year. So it's been a huge success. And, it's folks like, Doris and Deborah and Selena, you guys are really making this worthwhile for people, and they keep asking us to do more. So thanks again. This has been quite a successful project. So thank you.
Thank you.
Great.
Thank you, guys. Take care.
So much.
Bye.